Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. Let's talk near death.
And we go down this same drop of 10 metres, only this time the boat flipped over. It was in that moment that I felt sheer panic. I knew that this was my last breath. And this black water in front of me opened up a horizon of light. So I had a living and a deceased coming towards me to greet me.
Today I'm talking with Dr. Nicole Gruel, a spiritual health and wealth coach. Nicole had a near-death experience as a teenager, which led on to her mission to elevate the spiritual well-being of humanity. Nicole is a past board member of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, the co-founder of IANS Sharing Groups Online, and the author of her latest book, The Power of Notes: How Non-Ordinary Transcendent Experiences Transform the Way We Live, We Love, and Lead. Nicole, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. It is such a pleasure to be here.
It's so great to connect. So tell us a little bit about your experience. Take us back to when you were a teenager and all of this started to open up for you.
Absolutely. So it happened in New Zealand, actually.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah.
I love that.
I was whitewater rafting. And a friend and I were going down, I don't remember the name of the river. I wish I did because it's your part of the world, but
yeah.
you might know it. There was a 10-meter drop in the waterfall, and that was kind of the feature of it. So we were rafting, and it was the two of us and two instructors on our raft. And we went down one time. We had a smashingly wonderful time, so much so that we decided to do it again. Only the second time round we went down and, the mood was set differently. The clouds were kind of grey in the sky now, and then it was coming over overcast. And we go down this same drop of 10 metres, only this time the boat flipped over. Oh. And I was thrown out of the boat. I think the others were too, but I don't know. And I plunged very deep down underwater. And when you have 10 metres of water from a gushing waterfall coming down, it's a lot of water pressure. And I had the reaction that you're not meant to have, because I grew up as a swimmer. I tried to swim. So I put my arms out to swim, and that just pushed me down even further. So next thing, I end up in water that's black. I didn't know which way was up or down. There was no point swimming in any direction at all. And it was in that moment that I felt sheer panic. I knew that this was my last breath.
Yeah. And
then the next thing that happened was everything was just calm and still. Totally calm, totally still. And in front of me, I say in front, but I don't really know where the front was, right? Because I didn't know which way was up or down. But in this black water in front of me opened up a horizon of light. And the only thing I liken it to help people relate is the scene in Ghost, where Sam and Molly meet up again, and for that brief moment they can see each other again, and it's that horizon of light where Sam's going to finally cross over to. So it was just like that, and I bawl my eyes out every time I see Ghost, because there I am again. So this horizon of light opened, and from the horizon coming towards me was my maternal grandmother, who at that time was still living. She was actually still alive.
Oh, this is so interesting.
And also walking with her was my first dog, Pet, who I'm an only child. And so my pets were like my siblings. I was very, very close with them.
Yeah.
The first one was, my everything. Now that dog had passed away. So I had a living and a deceased coming towards me to greet me.
Can I just say, you're the only other person I've ever met who's had a living person in the NDE.
So you did too?
For me, it was my dad, who was alive and well at the time. I
Wow.
actually believe in hindsight, and I haven't quite put the dots together to understand if this even makes sense, but I believe that he's one of my guides, or
Mm-hmm.
he's a teacher in my life, a spiritual teacher. He was in my NDE, and he was there, and the voice slightly behind me, but in my ear, just so loud. And
Mm.
yet he was such a prominent part of my NDE, and I've always questioned it because I don't know anyone else that's had a living person in their NDE. So
So I hadn't heard about it either. And 2 years ago now, I went to the Assist conference. And Elizabeth Sabet, who now is the president of Assist, at the time was volunteering there and helping out with the bookshop. And I went to Elizabeth because she's very knowledgeable about all of these matters, and particularly around visitations. And so I just felt called to her to ask her. And I said, Elizabeth, this happened to me. Have you heard about this anywhere else? And she said, actually, I have. She said, it's quite rare. It's quite rare, but it has, there are some accounts out there of a living relative who has come. And I said, well, what do you think it means? I mean, I'd love to make the dots. And she said, similar to what you're saying, she said, well, what is the spiritual connection between you and your grandmother? Does she serve some role as a guide? She gave me a question back, which was really, what is the journey that you've had together?
So tell us a little bit about your experience. Take us back to when you were a teenager.
So this horizon of light opened, and from the horizon coming towards me was my maternal grandmother, my first dog. And I was 14 years old at the time. So, I had the mind of a 14-year-old, and I was looking at them thinking, well, that's really odd. What are you doing underwater?
Yeah,
that was the only thought, that, as you would, as a 14-year-old, that was it.
Yeah.
And then from just very close to my ear, I heard this strong male voice say, Nicole, remember to breathe. And when I heard that, the recollection came back of the briefing that we'd just had from the instructors, which is, if you happen to fall into the water and go down, you need to curl up like a ball, because we had these life jackets on. And when you curl up like a ball, you come up like a cork in water. And so I heard that, Nicole, remember to breathe. I curled up. I guess something in my brain kicked in. And I curled up, and next thing, the water went from black to dark green to light green, and then the whitewash. And when I emerged, I was at the mouth of this cave. And I'm so lucky I came up when I did, because if I'd gone a bit further down that road, they wouldn't have been able to get me out with the boat. That would have been it. So I emerged, and everyone else was in the boat by this stage, and they were looking for me. And I was told I was under, I think, for about a couple of minutes.
Wow.
And they came over and grabbed me, put me on the boat, and that was the end of that. And, I was 14, and my friend and I were just glad that we were alive, and that nobody had to come to our room and look through our luggage if we were deceased and find that we had smuggled a packet of cigarettes. That was
There's your priority.
That was our priority. We were kids. Yep.
Yeah. So did you know, when all this was happening, did you know that you were dying when you saw the light? What happened? What were you thinking at the time?
All I knew was this is my last breath. Yeah. And that was the panic moment. And then I guess because the calm came, there was nothing I questioned. Yeah. I didn't even think about, am I dying or not? I just had an awareness that this is my last breath, or I can't take another breath after this. Yeah.
And was that calm quite inviting? Was it nice?
Oh, completely. It was amazing. It was just a transition just like that, from sheer panic in the last breath to total calm. Wow. Peace and calm, complete. Yeah. There was no fear, no panic, nothing.
Yeah. And when you saw, was it your grandmother, your maternal grandmother that you saw? Yeah. When you saw her and you saw your dog, what was going through your mind then? Were you confused?
No, it was really just, what are you doing here? We're underwater.
What am I doing there?
That didn't enter my head at all. What am I doing here? No, it was, we're underwater. What are you doing here? It was more curiosity, like, oh, this is unusual. This is a bit odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you Did you interact with them at all?
No, that was it. They were coming, and then I heard the voice. Yeah, it was quite brief.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Any idea where that voice came from? Was that in your head? Was that from a higher source?
No, it was behind me. It was right here. It was on one of these sides. I think it was my left side.
Yeah.
I mean, mind you, I was underwater, so it wasn't, but it was.
Yeah. Hard to tell.
And that's where I heard it from. It was external to me. It wasn't an inner voice.
Yeah.
It was a male voice external to me, but very close.
Yeah. Wow.
And I don't know whose.
Mm. You talk about how this was the significant event in your life that changed everything for you, opened you up spiritually and to live a more conscious life. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd say it's the beginning of many, and maybe it's not even the beginning. I was born to a very open, spiritually open family, and so widely traveled parents, migrant parents as well. So already we're talking about that transitional ground. And they had both journeyed in their own ways, on their own pathways, respectively. So all of that came into who I was. So I guess the extraordinary was never really out of the ordinary in my world. You know, it was quite accepted and not questioned. So that was one big marker experience, but I was always interested in the beyond from a young age. I was asking my father questions about what God do I believe in when I was about 7 years old. So
Mm.
curious about it.
Mm.
And so the near-death experience was definitely a big one that at the time I didn't know how formative it was. It's one of those experiences, and this is typical of people who have NDEs as children. It formed part of how I understand the world as opposed to challenged it. So it wasn't like I was an adult with predetermined ways of understanding and operating in the world, and then the NDE happened and it radically changed it all.
Yeah.
For me, as a kid, it happened, and so I knew that that was possible. And so it just became a part of my understanding of the world that, I can see figures that have gone beyond, or that might still be alive, but they don't physically have to be there for me to interact with them, that things like this horizon of light are possible, that these extraordinary moments can happen. So I just walked with that knowing into the rest of my life. And it was only later, as I started to see that perhaps the way I see things and the things that I'm interested in are a little different, and I really started to investigate that and inquire and look into purpose and what am I doing here, that I began to realize more and more how foundational that experience was and how important. So that's why I call that time a portal opening for me. And not only did I have a near-death experience within 6 months at that time, it was my near-death experience, the death of my father, and the death of two other family members as well. So it was this window of a death initiation, which is a classic shamanic kind of opening as well. But again, I didn't have language for any of that back then.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a lot of death all at once.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Did you question why that was happening to you?
No. I was a teenager. It happened. It
Was
happened.
just
And
normal
if
for you.
anything, it was life. And if anything, I was really emotionally unequipped for that. And so I went through my teen years, and particularly my late teen years, with a lot of unprocessed grief and anger. And I just, pushed all of that away. And it was really in my 20s that I had to start to unpack that and process that and understand that and tap into it and allow it to come through, especially in places where it was lodged in my own body. Yeah.
Hard. Yeah.
Hard and liberating. Yoga for me was the pathway that was most helpful, yoga and expressive dance and creativity.
Yeah.
So a lot of, body-centered practices, and then coaching and counseling as well as spoken vehicles. So, there's a lot of layers where this processing has to happen. It's the deep parts of the body, there's the mind and the heart. Yeah.
So when this happened, when you had your near-death experience, you'd been under the water, they said probably for a couple of minutes. This might sound like an unusual question, but when you came out, were you aware that you'd had an NDE? Were you aware what had happened?
Um, well, immediately when I came out, the priority was just to get back on a boat.
Yeah.
Yep. And get to dry land. Yeah. And I think, yes, I was aware it happened. The processing of it probably came a bit later. I don't
Mm.
even know if I told my friend about what happened at the time, if it was that, because I probably didn't think it was anything extraordinary. It just happened.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because I think, especially with NDEs, a lot of time people know that something happened, but they're not quite sure what. Especially, we're talking quite a few years ago now, before internet times, before there was a lot of research on NDEs. And I hear a lot of stories where people actually, they say, well, this experience happened, but I didn't know I'd had an NDE until quite a few years later when they put all the pieces together in the puzzle. Then suddenly it all made sense and they're going, oh, that's what happened to me. So yeah, just wanted to know whether you knew straight away, and how
Yeah.
did you come to terms with what had happened immediately after that accident?
The experience never left me. Even today, when I recall that moment, it's just as potent. I can revisit that moment. It like I'm looking at you right now, but it's also, I can see that other experience right in front of me. It's that present to me.
Yeah.
So having the language for it to call it an NDE came down the road when I discovered that that was a term that is
Yeah.
used. Of course, yep, yep. So that was the mental piecing it together, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And how did I come to terms with it? Was that the other question?
Yeah, I mean, quite a shock, right?
Again, not really. Not really. And
Wow.
I put that down to because I was a kid
Yeah.
and I just accepted it as as what it was. I didn't question it. Um, and it just happened.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
just happened. I didn't feel I had to come to terms with it in any way. If anything, as I've grown, I reflect on it and try and understand more deeply, but I just sit in awe of the experience that, wow, that
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a
And
horizon of light opened up when the water was black. That happened. I don't question it.
yeah.
I just accept it because it is my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
it is.
What about afterwards? What was your, how do I ask this? Did you have any kind of after effects or any new gifts open up, or what did you notice in your life that was different from before this experience?
That's a really difficult question to answer given my age at the
Yeah.
time. I've always been very sensitive and very attuned to the emotions and energy fields of others. So, an empath. Um, there have been moments of foresight and clarity and vision that have come through as well, but now was it a direct result of the NDE? I don't know.
Mm,
Would it have happened anyway without the NDE? I don't know. Is that part of my natural makeup? I suspect so.
mm,
Did the NDE kind of um, move that into another layer of strength and possibility? I think yes. I think
mm.
yes, and that, like, I've come to that conclusion through doing my own research and inquiring on that question myself. But for me personally, I find it so hard to answer because I was a child at the time. If the experience would have happened as an adult, I think I could answer that much more clearly because I'd have more of a life before the NDE to compare it to.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And so, do you have some element of spiritual gifts in your life and things that you tap into?
Um, well, I'd like to think so. I'd
Yeah.
like to think so. So certainly for me, what is alive are feelings of flow. And there are moments of clear, intuitive knowing what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
Um, and I will, and then that thing will happen, and then I'll, know that that was true at the time. And yeah, I would say empathy. Empathy is probably the biggest one for me. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You said that you're on a mission to elevate the spiritual well-being of humanity. Can you expand a little bit on that and what that looks like?
Absolutely. So when we have something going on with our body, we go to a doctor, right? When we
Yeah.
have something going on with kind of heart and mind, then maybe we go to a counselor, coach, psychiatrist, psychologist, something like that. So it's someone that can deal with the head and the heart. But when we're going through deep existential issues, or we have spiritual awakenings, or something totally profound happens to us that we can't answer, but we know is important or very sacred, where do we go? Where do we go? I mean, some traditionally will have gone to their church down a religious path. Others in this kind of new age, now age, will go to transformational retreats, or, you know, the big outdoor festivals and these types of organic spaces where great transformations are happening. Think of Burning Man and these kinds of new churches, if you will.
Yeah.
But there's no clear structure in place in terms of where we go. And so when we're going through spiritual transformations and spiritual challenges that always come as part of the path. So a revolution in spiritual health is a way of opening that conversation to say, look, these things happen. They happen to us. We go through changes on energy levels, on layers beyond the physical. It's normal and natural to ask questions about life path and even around, you know, love and soul mateship and deeper questions that relate to our existence and our purpose on being on the planet. And it's relevant especially to people who've had near-death experiences, because they dance at the edge of existence. You know, most of them have touched on what is beyond that, and they have some sense of what that might be. So that's a spiritual conversation. And when we have those conversations, they inform our life. You know, our spiritual health informs our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, our relationship health, and the relationship we have with the planet ultimately. So I really feel that a spiritual wellness revolution, you know, a spiritual health revolution is essential if we are to address some of the existential issues we're going through, like, you know, enormous numbers of young people suiciding.
I know.
Enormous numbers, which I'm not saying spiritual health is the answer, but I'm saying it's a very important piece of the puzzle that we're not even talking about.
Yeah. Do you think that's even on the radar in terms of health conversations, the spiritual side of things?
It is in tiny, tiny, tiny pockets with certain people who are awake to that, who usually have had the experiences themselves and are working in the industry. They do exist out there, but I speak with many of these professionals and they feel isolated.
Yeah.
So this is more something that the mainstream needs to have a conversation around, that will make it easier for the professionals to integrate this into it. I've spoken with people who are in the mainstream medical industry who tell me that even on the checklist when you go and see a doctor, they have boxes in there around spiritual health, but no one either answers those questions or those conversations don't go anywhere. And so it's there. We know this is a thing. We know this is something to talk about. I think we just don't know how to talk about it, how to have these conversations, and why it's even important to have them. So, so that's one aspect of why it's important, is the existential, you know, living lives that matter, living lives that we feel we know why we're waking up in the morning and what we're doing here. You know, we feel connected to self, we feel connected to others, and a huge one is we feel connected to planet. This is a spiritual conversation too. What are we doing on this planet? How are we caretaking? And it's spiritual all the way down to the physical. This is as physical as we can get. Getting your hands into the earth, getting natural, eating foods, knowing where those foods come from, being intimately tied in with this earth, this home that is sustaining us. The spiritual conversation is a piece of the ecological mess that we're in right now. So I see it as an essential ingredient to so many of the world's problems that we're going through right now. Not to fully answer them, but to bring in some really important dimensions in holistic wellness.
Okay. And how do you think that we start that journey?
We have conversations about it. We do stuff like this.
Yeah.
We do
Okay.
exactly
Excellent.
things like this. We ask how people are going. We have open ears and curiosity about people's experiences that might be things that we might not ourselves have experienced or not even understand. But there are people having profound spiritual experiences every single day. We walk past them in the street. And because many of them don't have a vocabulary for what they're going through, and many of us might not have the ears to hear them because we don't understand, the conversations simply don't happen. But when you get talking with people about these experiences, many of them will say it is probably one of the most important things that has ever happened to them. And you know this, talking to NDEers. I mean, most of them probably don't talk about their experience unless they have a public platform doing so.
Yeah.
Some, I'm sure, are sharing their experience with you for the first time, which is such an enormous privilege. And these experiences, as you would know, shape that person immensely in terms of who they've become, how they walk the earth, every interaction they have with another living being, and even those that are non-living, if that's part of, you know, their story. How can we not talk about these things, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I can hear so much passion in your voice, and I can really feel how much you live for this. And it's just amazing. You've opened my eyes up to a few things here. I'm pretty keen to go do some research, to be honest. Have you got one particular message or one thing that you want to share with the listeners?
Oh, be you, whatever that is in its beautiful form. Like, just be unapologetically you, because it's beautiful. And we need more people to simply be free and relaxed and wake up to the core of who they are, because I fundamentally believe every single person has gifts, everyone. But it's not until we get very comfortable and very real with who we are in our essence that we can start to walk that pathway and discover how it is that we can truly contribute.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Dr. Nicole Gruel, thank you for coming on, sharing your NDE, sharing some of the teaching that you've had, the learnings that you've been through, and getting us all excited actually to go and live life to the full.
Yeah, join the revolution.
I love it. Nicole, thank you.
This is beautiful. Thank you for the opportunity to share, and I'm so glad we've connected.
Thank you.
And everyone stay tuned for action down in New Zealand, Australia.
I'll say, bring it on. Yeah. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast show. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, tell people about it. I'd love to get these messages out there. You can also connect with me on Facebook at Kirsty Salisbury Official, and you can subscribe to receive updates for new episodes as they come about. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, and this is Let's Talk Near Death.